A very, very good afternoon. Apologies for being a little late on this session. It's fantastic to have you all here, and we'll get going. I'm really, really pleased and honoured that I'm hosting this panel. I think this is an extremely important discussion that we will have for the next, sort of 50 minutes or so. I'm going to leave about 10 minutes at the end of this, at least, for questions from the audience. I know that we've got an extremely interested audience here, so I hope our panelists will allow us to open this up to the floor to ensure that everybody gets a chance. Let me just introduce my thoughts on where we are at as we get into this, and I'll ask our panelists to come up onto the stage. President Macron has called the Russian invasion an electroshock of awakening for NATO. He has repeatedly called for more European independence when it comes to defence, and he has proposed for the EU to build a collective security pact to deal with NATO and Russia. Russia's re-invasion of Ukraine has clearly already reshaped European security in ways that will be felt across the continent for decades to come. Governments clearly reassessing their defence and security priorities and requirements, both individually and within the framework of the NATO alliance and indeed the European Union. The speed of response and the level of European unity has clearly surprised an awful lot of people, many of us, most of us, in Europe and indeed beyond. The challenges do remain, I think it's clear, on maintaining that unity. I want to discuss all of this today with our panelists. His Excellency Paweł Jabłoński is the Undersecretary of State for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Poland. So if you'll join me, please, on the stage. Hi, nice to see you. I'm delighted that we still have with us Emine Dzhaparova, who is the first Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Many of you will have heard our discussion yesterday. It's super to have you with us. Patrick Turner is the Assistant Secretary General for Defence Policy and Planning for NATO. So please join us on the stage. Thank you. And Karin von Hippel is Director General of RUSI. I don't think I need to explain what RUSI is, but I'll just give it its full name, Royal United Services Institute. That's the UK's leading defence security think tank. And this is the panel you want to discuss European security, where we are at and where we are going forward. So thank you all for giving us the time. Here's where things stand. Here's my sort of five penneth worth. The US President Joe Biden back in Washington after a series of high-level, high-stakes summits in Europe. He returns home to, I think it's fair to say, many of the same questions that he left Washington with a week or so ago, or 4 or 5 days ago. And he leaves behind after saying the Russian President Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. Now, that's a comment that the White House has clearly walked back, saying that the president was not calling for regime change in Moscow. But be that as it may, big speech in Warsaw, and he's returned to Washington. Meantime, Ukraine's president, your president, Emine, is again pleading with NATO for a tiny fraction of its arsenal, asking for 1% of its military hardware and stockpiles, and asking, and this is important, who's in charge and who are you afraid of? Moscow, he says. He went on to say the price of procrastination with planes, for example, is thousands of Ukrainian lives. With that, I just want to come to you, sir. You offered MiG-29 fighter jets rejected by Washington. Is the West failing Ukraine at this point?
Thank you for raising this important issue, but I have to say that even though we wish to be very open about what we do for Ukraine, there are some things that, in our view, shouldn't be discussed in public. And this is, quite unfortunate that the issue of these particular way of support of the planes has been brought up. It wasn't our idea to bring it up. Nonetheless, we believe that still our offer that was publicly repeated after long discussion within NATO, within our allies, still stands. We still believe that we should be supporting Ukraine, we should be supporting Ukraine's defense effort in every possible way. Now, we are hearing, obviously, that if NATO or particular country does something, then Russia may consider it as an excuse to attack, as an excuse for war. Well, the thing is that Russia doesn't seem to need any excuses. It didn't need any excuse on February 24th. It didn't need any excuses in 2014, didn't need any excuses in 2008 when it attacked Georgia. Putin never needed any excuses. He was inventing some excuses, obviously. He started his career attacking Chechnya, attacking Grozny, murdering hundreds of civilians. No excuses needed. So now, actually, Russia does not attack further countries, not because it doesn't want to, not because it doesn't have reasons to. It never has reasons. It invents reasons. It doesn't attack because Ukraine is heroically and bravely defending itself, and Russia doesn't have adequate resources to attack more countries. But we should have no illusions that if we allow Putin to win this war, if we allow Putin to resupply, to regroup, to rebuild his capacity, he will be attacking more countries. He wants to do it. He already destabilizes also countries in the Balkans. In Central Asia, there is huge pressure on Moldova. This is Russia's tactics. This has been this tactics for years. Claiming that we should stay away and wait, maybe Putin will not do this, is simply a mistake. And by now, I think everybody should realize that.
Thank you. I want to now just open the floor and get a sense from each of our panelists about the specifics of our discussion today. I'm going to ask you all what this war has exposed in terms of Europe's defense system. And then I'm going to go on to you all individually to get a sense of how this invasion will reshape European security and shift the defense and security priorities of each of Poland, Ukraine, NATO, and then get a sort of a wider perspective from you, if we can. So let's start with that question. Let me start with you, Emine. What has this war exposed in terms of Europe's defense system?
Dear Becky, I'm happy to once again see you and discuss, from one hand, very complicated things, but from another hand, quite simple things. I believe that quite important here is to be honest, is having a frank diplomacy issue. I mean, I understand that Paweł said that something should not be vocal publicly, but something should be vocal publicly. And I want to vocal publicly saying that, look, this is not only the war of Ukraine, because we really fight for something that is in the very core and principle of international relations, like territorial integrity, rule-based order, rules, procedures, principles. And this has been violated in 2014, and the war that we have today is a consequence of our inability to give a proper response to that evil that happened in 2014. And then before Georgia, 2008, and then before, and we have many mistakes done. So my concern is that we should not allow other mistakes to happen, meaning that we have to know what to do in Ukraine. Then the second issue, we have big and small. Ukraine is much smaller, obviously, geographically, politically. Russia is a permanent member, Security Council, is a nuclear state, is a state that is largest country in the world, and then it blackmails. It just said that you should either follow the line of Russia or you should die. And I think that we should all recognize, as a matter of fact, that Putin questions the very existence of my country. We've heard this in his long speeches. We've heard this many times from the officials. And this is, again, I will be very frank, because when I talk to many of those whom I met, I feel that there is a false narrative that this is the war between NATO and Russia. Well, no, this is the war of Russia against my country that questions the very existence of my country. And then the question is, what kind of response should we suggest? So again, number one issue, when there is a crime happening, we have a criminal and we have a victim. We all know that the criminal is Russia and a victim is Ukraine. So when the international community suggests to compromise on the cost of the victim, Is it right? Because when the crime is happening, you should persecute the criminal. This is what we mean calling to international community, that we should think how to persecute the criminal. And the logic here is very frank and very simple. We should make Ukraine bigger. We should make Ukraine stronger. We should back Ukraine up with weapons, with sanctions, so that we could commonly fight with Russia, because we pay the price of our people. We pay their lives because they are fighting. And then we need sanctions, and then we need weapons, then we need heavy weapons. And I believe that this is the only way how we can win.
I understand that. I think let's stay focused on what we're doing this afternoon. All of your points are absolutely massively valid, of course. We want to talk about what this war has exposed in terms of Europe's defence system, and then how we believe the invasion might shift and shape policy going forward. Patrick.
So, starting in the same place, the invasion has no basis, no rationale, no justification, entirely unprovoked. So our job, and that doesn't just mean the job of Ukraine's immediate neighbors and friends, but our job collectively is to turn it back. So that is our job. The Minister just said some of the components of that job, so that means support to Ukraine, maximum support to Ukraine, economic, humanitarian, but also military in NATO. That support before the war for a number of years was provided by allies, including in terms of training a lot of Ukrainian soldiers. So the benefits of that are showing, and both before and now it takes the form of providing military assistance to Ukraine. That needs to continue. Ukrainian friends have been very clear, sometimes publicly, on what is required, and we always listen carefully to what is required, but I don't particularly want to get into enumerating how much, when, where from, and so on, but there is a very strong will amongst Ukraine's friends, NATO allies, but also others, to assist in all of those ways, in very strong sanctions. So again, there have been very strong and fast sanctions. Potentially in future there will need to be more, I imagine, and ditto for countries which want to support Ukraine, as a minimum, not assisting Russia in getting around the sanctions, not assisting Russia in terms of providing military support to a country which has invaded others. What has it said about defence in Europe? I would say that the actions which have been taken in NATO in recent weeks, also for the defence of allies. NATO is a defensive alliance. Its principal purpose is to defend its members, but there have been serious action in recent weeks. So hundreds of thousands of troops across NATO, air, land, sea, on higher readiness. 40,000 troops under direct NATO command, mainly in the eastern part of the alliance. The US building up its presence in Europe to 100,000, and we are clear that the challenge which has posed, the new circumstances, the new reality in Europe, is likely to be a reality for a long time to come. This is not a flash in the pan. It's not just going to be reversed overnight. So we need to do, as well as what we've already done in the short term, a serious reset for the longer term, including a strengthened posture in the eastern part of the alliance. And I don't, we might get into NATO, EU. I think that's really a sub issue. It's, can Europe and America together defend allies? Can they support partners under threat?
Karin.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. Can you hear me okay?
No.
Yes. Okay, okay, that's much better. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you to the government of Qatar. RUSI is delighted to be a partner for this important event. also, at a personal level, well, it's hard for many of us who live far from the front lines to imagine what you're going through. I know not only obviously in Ukraine, but in the border countries. Can I just say, at a personal level, my heart is with you. My grandmother was born in Lviv, which was Lemberg back then. In 1914, she left when the Russians arrived. And then, of course, she had to leave Austria in 1938 again, so twice a refugee. So my heart is with you, even though I can't feel what you're going through. I would just make a few very quick points. I think we all realize, I think we made a lot of assumptions about Russia that were incorrect. I think many people were accused of crying wolf about Russia or being paranoid about Russia. And we've seen that they have continuously lied throughout. And we should have pushed back in 2008, 2014, 2015 in September when they went into Syria. And I actually was working in the US government at the time, and we should have pushed back, and we didn't. And so these incremental steps just gave Putin the confidence that we wouldn't do anything this time. So I think that was a big mistake that we all made. And then, of course, I think we're all learning that it's not just advanced technologies and investments in cyber and AI that we need with our militaries, but conventional force matters, as your people are bravely and heroically showing all of us. And then I guess my last point is it's not just European security or transatlantic security, because as many people have pointed out here, food shortages from Ukraine, Russia are going to impact Africa, Egypt, Turkey, other countries. So it's a global issue, and we can't just say, let's leave it to the region to solve.
So the fissures are there. The work needs to be done, clearly. Let's start then in Poland. How does this invasion reshape European security, to your mind, and shift the defense and security priorities of Poland?
In fact, I don't think it reshaped the priorities, because the priorities were always there, only that not everybody realized how important they are. Many countries, especially in the Central Eastern Europe, those that are very close to Russia, for many years have been advocating for increased defense spending. This was a call. Obviously, US backed that as well. There was lots of discussions, very tense sometimes, with other European countries that did not wish to fulfill that. Now it seems that even some countries that were very reluctant, this current situation made them change their mind. Now everybody realizes how important it is. The need to increase our defense abilities are absolutely essential now. For decades, vast majority of European territory was lucky enough to be living in peace. It wasn't obviously for all Europe, because we had conflicts in Europe. We had Balkans, we had countries in other regions, but where NATO was present, where European Union was present, we generally always had peace. But this peace wouldn't be possible had it not been for very strong transatlantic alliance, because US has been a cornerstone of our security always, despite some differences that we might have between Europe and US. In countries like Poland, like other Central European countries, we know very well that this important cornerstone, this access between US and European allies, is absolutely crucial to maintain peace. Now, it obviously is visible now. We had debates within the EU whether to establish some form of European army or some other peace force. And these debates will be ongoing. I'm of the opinion that we should build our own defense capabilities, not to rely only on the US, but at the same time trying to somehow decouple in this regard from US wouldn't be wise. Now it seems like even those there was this quote of President Macron saying about electroshock, because previously he called NATO to be in a state of brain damage. It turned out that it is very much the opposite. NATO is well alive and hasn't been strong, as strong as it is now. Obviously, there is the question, what are we going to do? How the situation will develop? Poland's position is quite clear about this. We should be ready to perform a peacekeeping mission as well, because what is most important now is not to find a solution that would bring temporary peace and allow Russia to just have some time to regroup. What is most important now is to save the people of Ukraine, people that are being bombed, that are being attacked, civilian infrastructure, and civilians are being murdered, not by accident. This is happening on purpose. Putin failed to achieve his tactical goals in the first couple of days, so he changed his tactics. He wants to destroy as many cities, he wants to inflict terror, he wants to break Ukrainian spirit. We should not let this happen.
Your suggestion that NATO troops are deployed as peacekeepers in Ukraine has been rebuffed by your allies.
We're living in a times where various ideas are being put forward. They might get rebuffed one day, and then we are discussing this another day. And some things that were rebuffed a couple of weeks before turn out to be reality later. Let me just remind you that on the day when the war started, there was a discussion about closing airspace over European Union for Russian aircraft. This was discussed on the European Council. This was not agreed. This was a Polish proposal together with other Central European governments. Over the course of next 3-4 days, we managed to do it because there was a political will to do it. And in Poland, there is political will to be persistent, to go further. We believe we should not stop halfway there. We need to be decisive, because otherwise we can waste a good opportunity to support Ukraine enough.
You clearly think there is some prospect of getting those troops on the ground, do you?
I believe that we should do everything in our power to stop Russia from killing civilians. And I believe that there is a capacity also for NATO to act in this way. It is Ukraine's government decision, no one else. Ukraine is a sovereign country. It has the right to decide which troops are on its territory. If Ukraine wants it, Polish government, several other governments, we are ready.
Emine, there are indications that Russia's top military priority is now to advance in the Donbass region, in the east of Ukraine, if they were successful. I want you to just explain what the impact on Ukraine's security and defense policy would be in the future. You can just back into that by just referring to the conversation that we've just been having about the possibility, and I'll talk to Patrick about this, but the possibility of putting boots on the ground, NATO boots on the ground, as a peacekeeping force.
I think I should start with one of my personal stories. I remember the first day of war when I came to MFA and my minister was stuck in between because the sky has already been closed and he was coming from New York and he couldn't make it, so I had to take the leadership in the ministry, and we had 100 over diplomats coming to MFA, and it's a huge building in the center of Kyiv. It's a wonderful one. It was constructed during the Soviet times, and then we decided to check up the bomb shelter just in case if Kyiv will start be bombed. And then we went downstairs, and then one of the employees who is kind of 30 plus years employed for the MFA, he said, you know, this was constructed during the Soviet time, and the irony of the situation that we were supposed to hide from the American bombs here. This is true, because indeed during the Soviet time we were fed up with the stories about the danger of the United States, about the danger of Western world, and still I think that the biggest miscalculation of Putin is that he thinks that if Ukrainian people speak Russian, and we do have a lot of people speaking Russian, that this is a part of Ruski Mir, part of Russian world, but it's not. And when he came to my country, he found the greatest miscalculation, that first there is a resistance, that there is a great military resistance, and that the Ukrainian army is existing. It's not that we had in 2014 with 2 defense ministers, Russian citizens, who were weakening our army for ages before 2014. And then the people are not happy with this reality. So this paradigm is very important. Then going back to the question that what Ukraine wants and how can it actually change the security. I mean, Ukraine really expressed its will by the parliament vote, saying that we want to become a member of European Union and we want to become a member of NATO because we don't feel secure with Russia. We don't want to live in the Soviet remnant. We want to be and to have another future, because, you know, the cynical thing is that Russian people, rich Russian people, they take their children abroad to this hated Western world for them to take education there. And just as, again, I will refer to my personal stories. I think that it's really important to understand what is the craziness around. I used to be a journalist when the occupation of Crimea happened, and this so-called day of referendum, 16th of March 2014, I worked with ITV News, a British group of journalists. We traveled the peninsula back and forth, and I just had to come in my apartment to take some stuff, and I jumped out of my elevator, and in Simferopol, there's an opposite to my apartment, there is a couple who lived together with us, and they have 2 sons. And one of the sons lives in the United States in San Francisco, and his wife is from Feodosia, which is a small city in Crimea, also lives with him. And then I saw them, and then I asked, oh, what are you doing here? Because they are usually coming once in a year to visit their parents. And they said that they came to vote at the referendum to vote for the Russian future of Crimea. And then I said, it's very interesting that, I mean, how come that you live in the United States, you have your son already a citizen of the United States, and you come to vote for the Russian Crimea and to choose the face of people like myself? And then what do you think happened? They voted, they got back to the United States, 8 years passed, and then the girl, the lady, she's still texting on Facebook how beautiful life is in Russian Crimea, and then she still lives in San Francisco, texting hatred speech on Facebook about the United States, NATO, and so on, and this is the craziness. So you cannot find any argument when you speak to people like this, and there's millions of this kind of people. And then again, this is a huge miscalculation, because Russia still thinks that we are an appendix of Russian world, but we are not, and we clearly say so. So when we choose, freely choose, and it's not the artificial thing that comes on the top from United States or other states, it's from within that Ukrainian people don't feel secure themselves with Russia. Because before 2014, we didn't have NATO rhetorics in this way, we didn't have it enshrined in Constitution, and what they did, they attacked our land, they occupied Crimea, they annexed the other parts of the territory. So the feeling is that we feel secured when it's about Western world, and we want to be the part of this Western world, and we fight for this Western world. So now, if they failed to take control over the whole country, they are focusing now on the southern and eastern parts. For example, the bordering region with Crimea is called Kherson region. They started to launch Kherson People's Republic, same as they do in Donetsk, in Luhansk, and this is crazy.
Your personal reflections, by the way, are so important, I think, for the entire audience to hear. So thank you. And I mean, it's super useful that we can just have you here, and it's wonderful to have you here, and to really give us a sense of the stories on the ground. Patrick, President Macron calls Russia's invasion an electroshock of awakening for NATO. He has repeatedly called for more European independence when it comes to defence, and proposed for the EU to build a new collective security pact to deal with NATO and Russia. I know that you've said that is a sub-story, as it were, but it isn't, sir. With the greatest of respect, it's out there at present, and we have to discuss it. So come on, how does this invasion reshape European security and shift the defence and security priorities of NATO and the European Union?
So I'm very happy to talk about it, but it remains a sub-story. But first thing to say is, I should have said it right at the beginning, it's a massive privilege to be sitting together. There's nothing more you need to say, really, but Ukraine, the people, the response, the fight for freedom, and your own country has inspired hundreds of millions, billions of people around the world, reawoken a lot of individuals who'd forgotten that freedom, independence, the right to choose your own destiny actually matters. So I think it's woken up a lot more people than just the West, and it's made us think about how we think about the world and our values, the rules in the world. So that's probably little comfort from day to day, but it's had a massive global impact. I think that will go on. On European security, I'd say what we see in NATO is a sort of a real strengthening of and reaffirmation of what we call the Transatlantic Bond. So that means the US and Europe, a shared endeavour. But I think it goes much wider than that. As I was just saying, this is global. NATO is, I said it earlier on today, far from brain dead, and despite being 70 3 years old, far from geriatric, and I think it has continuing life. It will evidently need to have continuing life. On European defence, to be very clear, what is needed now in Europe for European but also wider security is greater efforts by a large number of countries. So a lot of countries which to some extent had still taken peace for granted, despite some evidence to the contrary, are now thinking, now that peace is absolutely shattered on the European continent, people who lived through the experiences in the Balkans in the 90s certainly wouldn't say there's been peace in Europe since the end of the Cold War, because that's not true, but it's been shattered, and nations need to think about that. A lot of the Eastern allies are saying they need to spend more, be more serious about their own defence. I think that's welcome and a good thing. And other allies, starting most spectacularly with Germany, a sort of massive strategic reset for Germany, which sets a great example for other allies in Europe. So do we need more European defence? Absolutely, more European capability. But when it comes to the defence of countries in NATO, the framework for that defence is NATO. It's a transatlantic alliance, and it needs to be a shared responsibility between European countries more serious about their own defence and a US which stays engaged and perhaps strengthens even further its engagement in Europe.
Thank you. Karin?
Just to maybe add on to something that Patrick was saying, I 100% agree about NATO has primacy and should have primacy, and it's great to see everyone reinvesting in NATO, European countries in particular. But I think we need to be thinking about various scenarios and really thinking carefully about it. Now, I'm the only non-official on this panel, and I know officials think through these things, but they do it privately, and I think it's important for the public and others to engage in some of these scenarios, one of which is if Donald Trump wins again, what happens to NATO? Second is, what if a weakened Putin somehow manages to stay in power? How can we engage with him given the crimes, the war crimes he's committed against civilians, not just in Ukraine, but in Syria and Chechnya and elsewhere? We have engaged with him up until now, but we shouldn't have. But we still need to engage on some level if he remains. But I think we just need to be thinking through all of these scenarios. There's a scenario that he could let off a tactical nuclear weapon. When you ask any official about that, they'll say, I can't speculate. And I understand why they say that. But I think it puts everyone else in a very uncomfortable position, because maybe we need to speculate. Maybe that's what think tanks do, the Doha Forum, others do. My neighbors are buying nuclear suits in London, right? People are getting very nervous, and I just think we need to have a better understanding. I was pleased to hear that Biden was, saying, we will respond. He didn't say we will respond with chemical weapons, but we will respond if they, but I think they need to go a bit further and say what they would do.
Absolutely. It's a question I'm going to put to the French Foreign Minister in what is the closing panel. Getting a sense from him as to what was meant by that. We will respond in kind. Were there to be a nuclear attack, a chemical attack. I want to know what that means. Look, Karin, you're making a really good point. You as a think tank, we as journalists to a certain extent spend our time gaming these situations, right? I don't think I'm going to get from you, sir, much on the speculative front or on the hypothetical front. It would be useful for you to answer some of those questions. What does happen? You must be gaming this. What does happen if Donald Trump becomes the US president in 2024? It's a very good question. He was sounding all but the death knell, wasn't he? He did everything possible to sound the death knell for NATO. I don't know whether you want to address some of what Karin's just said. We certainly want to move on. We've got another 5 minutes together before I open this to the audience.
So indeed, I'm not going to speculate on the outcome of another election in any country, whether the US or in any other country. All I'd observe is that NATO's been through times good, bad, and indifferent over 73 years. It's still here. It will still be here in many years' time, and we're absolutely devoted to doing our job, and that's not going to be changing.
Thank you. Just before I open this to the audience, I started off by saying there has been, an enormous, very surprising show of what seems to be complete unity from NATO allies, from Europe, with the West, with the US, over the last, I'd say 6 weeks. The worry is, will that fracture at some point? Paweł, how concerned are you? Let's not talk about how surprised we've been by that unity, because literally I hear that every day. And you know what? I get it. How convinced are you that this will hold, or how concerned are you that this will fracture? And if so, how quickly?
I'm quite sure that we will be able to hold the unity. Obviously, unity doesn't mean that we disagree at times, that we discuss, that we have various perspectives, that we have various ideas how to do it. The question of sanctions is one of the topics of debate, and we are discussing how to be effective at the same time, not to damage our economies, not to go the wrong way. And there is debate, they're sometimes very heated, but it doesn't mean that there is lack of unity. When it comes to pressuring Russia, I believe we shouldn't be focusing on speculating or creating some scenarios for the future. How would we engage if Putin wins? How would we engage with him? This is not the time to consider how to engage with Putin. Now we need to engage together all of our resources to stop him. And if we talk, for example, about sanctions, I think this is a very important element, because every country is worried about the economic outcome of it. Our economies are suffering, not just on energy market, also in food market. There is potential, even larger crisis looming. But this crisis, rising prices, this is not effect of sanctions. This is effect of the war. If we are able to stop this war, and the only effective way to do it is through sanctions, not just some another punches in the economy. Russia has been punched quite strongly over the past weeks. So people are sending in lines, they're not able to buy basic products. But Putin doesn't care about that very much. He cares only about the money that he has to finance the war. So until we cut him off the money for fuel, for oil, for gas, for coal, he will not care about his people. He only cares until he has money for the war. So we need to cut him off. That is why we also need to engage with partners here in the region, in the Gulf. We need Arab countries more than ever for an effective partnership, not just for economy, but to secure peace, more than ever in history.
And it's about securing peace first and foremost in Ukraine, and then the wider issue. I mean, the European security architecture will have to deal with the impact on Ukraine and the impact of the refugee crisis for months, maybe years to come. And I think as we have this discussion, so we should consider just what the physical impact of this war will have on and what needs will be addressed for European security.
And it's not just about that, because obviously the refugee crisis is unprecedented. After World War II, there was never such a huge wave in such a short time. But at the same time, Russia is trying to destabilize Europe in so many other places, in the Balkans, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Central Asia as well, in the Caucasus region. We will see more of that. So if we are not stopping Putin now, there will be much more difficult times ahead.
Right, thank you. We have 10 minutes. Thank you. I already see hands going up. I'm going to do 10 minutes, and then if everybody on this panel is in agreement, I'd like to leave the final word to Emine this evening. So if you'd like to just think about the message that you would like to convey to this audience as we close this session out in 10 minutes' time, the floor is absolutely yours. But first and foremost, yes, sir. Hand there. Yes.
My question.
Keep the questions short and say who you are, sir, please.
Bill Clifford, World Affairs Councils of America. The question is about the NATO security concept, the new one. The old one in 2010 was a lot more optimistic about a Russian reset and didn't even mention China. How is the new one being reshaped in the prism of this war, and what can NATO do to drive a wedge between Russia and China, which just pledged limitless friendship?
Thank you, sir. Patrick.
So indeed, the new concept will look pretty different from the last one in 2010, which was certainly over-optimistic. As you say, there was no China in it, so there will certainly be China in it. We see China posing a serious set of challenges, but also China in certain areas can be a partner. Russia, a completely different landscape, and that is a landscape as far as we can see for the long term. A Belarus which is in a different position also. So a long term impact. All the more important that we do collective defence, and we need a serious reset for the long term.
I want to take 3 questions. Yes, sir. Here, microphone here, please. I see the need for a microphone here. If we've got a second microphone, I'll take the chap over here and one here. Yes, sir, I'll come to you. Okay, thank you, sir. Our first question was good, short, and succinct. I would like that to set a precedent for the next 8 minutes. Got it.
To the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, again, thank you for being here. We are all supportive and admired by your courage. You seem to, and when I say you and your colleagues in the government, you have clearly been able to win the hearts and minds of the Western audience. But you touch on a very important point. The Russian public is not there. They still believe in Putin, and I think it's even more concerning when we look at the Russian public in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. 78% of the Russians living there, so Russians who have total access to your information, still support Putin. So what can we do collectively to bring them on board?
Very good question. Yes, sir.
Martin Indyk, Council on Foreign Relations in New York. The question is to the amazing Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine and the Undersecretary from Poland. I wonder what you would both say to many people in this audience who come from this region, where there is an ambivalence about what's happening in Ukraine. Doesn't actually apply to Qatar, which is now going to be providing gas to provide an alternative to Russian gas for Europe. But it does apply to many of the other countries here, both Arabs and Israel, who now have Russia in their neighborhood and are reluctant to take sides, both in terms of enforcing sanctions or in the case of the Saudis, in terms of increasing oil production. So I just wonder how you would address that ambivalence.
Thank you, Martin. I didn't have my glasses on. If I had, I would have recognized you. I'm getting old. Yes, sir, here, and then I'm going to take your question over here. I will come to you, sir. Yeah, keep it short, please.
Nuri Turkel from the Hudson Institute in Washington. First of all, on behalf of the Uyghur Americans, I want to extend my support to you, Madam Deputy Foreign Minister. My question is quite simple. Is it naivete to think that China will have a positive role in the ongoing crisis?
Thank you. And this question just there on the floor.
Thank you very much for wonderful insights. Adil Hamazi of Chatham House. If you could just say, maybe open to anybody, just a little bit on the political ROI of sanctions. So Iraq, Venezuela, Cuba, Iraq, I could go on and on. Russia is slightly more significant than these countries when it comes to the global economy, with stagflation on the horizon, demand destruction, etc. Where is this going, and what is the balance sheet in your opinion?
Thank you very much indeed. That's an excellent question. Right. There was a question on information. Yes. Yes. Patrick.
So I'll respond to the one on China. China, like every other country, each country in this room, each country around the world has the ability to make the right choices. I think China's friends, other countries, need to be encouraging China, but it's certainly not just China to make the right choices. It obviously has a considerable ability to influence Russia to have an impact now on this situation. It may have made a declaration of whatever the terms were, undying friendship, but that doesn't have to prevent it making good choices now. So let's aim for that.
Very briefly, on sanctions, I don't think we've seen anything at this level before, especially because the private sector and individuals and others are jumping in really in a significant way. I'd encourage you to go to our website. We have a very good colleague who knows a lot about this, and we've been publishing on this. Just on China, I personally believe that China can demonstrate leadership at the global level. It wants to be a global player by really putting pressure on Putin. I think Xi is the only one who can do that. They're very nervous for all sorts of reasons, but I think if China is able to play a positive role here, China will emerge in a very different place globally. It'll have a better relationship with the U.S., and so it's actually in everyone's interest, including China's, that they do play that role, but I'm not sure they will.
Thank you. Paweł.
A very brief answer to the question on ambivalence, because obviously there is ambivalence at times, and there is even some pro-Russian attitudes in certain countries across the globe, but this, in our view, results from Russian misinformation. There can be no ambivalence between the aggressor and the victim, and there shouldn't be ambivalence with the Arab world. Look, Arab countries hold the same values as we believe in Europe when it comes to territorial integrity, to preserving borders, to protecting peace. There is no difference between us. Now is the time to go together and to say where is who's the aggressor, who's the victim, who do we support, especially that this can also form a strong platform of cooperation in terms of economy, in terms of energy supply. This is in this very bad situation globally. There is a silver lining, and there is an opportunity for us to explore how to create a long and stable partnership between Europe and Arab countries and countries in the Gulf.
Thank you. Emine, we've got a couple of minutes, so address any of those questions that you feel that you can or must, and then I think we'll just give you the opportunity to just spend a couple of minutes addressing the floor.
I think that I have a privilege to resume. I think that most of the questions have been answered by my dear colleagues, and I thank you for this. Look, this is my second day here, and I've been really carefully listening to every single colleague whom I met today, every single question that I received today, because for me it's a kind of taking the sense of what you feel and how you perceive the situation in my country. And I really think that in order to avoid ambivalence, which is evident sometimes, we have to be frank, honest, and we have to act in a dignity way. And I think that my country is an embodiment of this frankness, honesty, and dignity. The second issue is that really, it's quite simple to understand. Look, Russia attacked us. We did nothing to have this war. We are trying to do our best to fight back. We are dying. Our people are dying. Then the other world kind of witnessing it, saying, okay, let us think, what shall we do? Let us, elaborate sanctions. Sanctions are not enough because so far even these 3,000 sanctions that have already performed within a couple of weeks, not enough because still Russia has potential to fight, to finance its army because we sanction from one hand and buy oil and gas from another hand. And then the question is, everyone is scared of having a global scenario, but the issue is how long should others see these massacres and witness these massacres? So the message here is probably goes to the question why these people are zombified, because we really have an issue with people who are totally brainwashed. People, 140 million nation, and at least half of this nation praying of having this President Putin, you know, and recognizing his actions as a glorious actions. So what should we do? Because they will not kick him off, obviously, right? And this is the nation, the biggest nation that we have. And then what is the consequence to this kind of countries? What is the consequence? Because Russia has a nuclear power and everyone is scared of them using the tactical nuclear power. Again, very frank, because they are blackmailing everyone. They are saying that we can use it. And then the community, the international community say that, okay, we have to be balanced. And really and honestly, you know, I have the feeling that everyone has in mind when we say that we have to resume the war. We want to resume the war. We are now in negotiation process, but then the most difficult issue goes to the territorial integrity issue with Crimea and Donbass. And what Putin wants, he wants to have a status quo. And what Ukraine says that, look, this is something that cannot be compromised, because if you compromise this will cause a domino effect, and then the others will suffer, and this is only the beginning of other wars and other annexations and occupations and territorial claims. And the issue is that what could be done here, you know, what is the response here? Probably no one knows, but I believe that, I really honestly believe that unity is important. Russia is doing its best to convince that there is no unity, that Western world is divided, that no one is going to back up Ukraine. But I believe this is not true. And what we see on the border with Poland, when thousands of Polish people open up their doors for Ukrainian people and other countries, Central European countries, this is that should be performed as a continuation. And then just to resume, to conclude, we had a lunch, high-level lunch on behalf of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed, which I'm very thankful for. And I came up with this reflection that there are model of survival, revival, and arrival. My country is trying its best to survive. We are paying the highest price possible, paying the lives of our people for this war to survive. We want to revive. We believe 93% really, Ukrainians believe that they will win, and then we will reconstruct our country. And we do hope that you will be with us in this global reconstruction. And then arrival, that we will arrive to the country that we want to live in. And this is a European country. It's a digital country. It's a modern democratic country. And this is something that is not only of a paper value for us, but something that we've been dying for. Thank you.
Emine, I think the applause in this room says it all. Thank you very much indeed. I know that when you and I spoke early yesterday, you said it was quite difficult to get on the plane to come here. You felt a sense of guilt about leaving. It didn't feel right to be sitting on a plane, you know, eating whatever you were eating and just feeling like, you know, you were leaving the whole thing behind. Look, your presence here, I think, is so important. It is so important that you have left the country and that you have addressed a regional audience, a mostly regional audience, I think, here who you know, need to hear from you. They can hear from me on CNN, but they need to hear from you. And so thank you for coming. Thank you all for being on this panel. I'm sorry that we've run out of time, but it's been fabulous having you. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you, Doha Forum, for hosting us, and you, the audience, for joining us today. Thank you.